she of all things transformational, transformational bodywork, transformational guidance coaching, and for our purposes here today, transformational yoga. So today we're going to work on the hips a little bit with a little bit of a focus on doing pigeon pose. The hips are a really, really complex structure in the body with many, many, many different muscles attaching to the pelvic and sacral bones coming from all different directions. So it's complicated to know exactly what the problem is when we have tight hips. But there are some typical patterns that show up in our bodies for people who have tight hips. And there's some typical patterns that show up in the body for people who have hips that are maybe too loose. Because actually, too tight or too loose are neither necessarily that healthy. We want good range of motion, we want good flexibility and good stability in the body, pretty much most parts of the body, because that's what helps us to have the fluidity to live in this body that needs to kind of adjust to our environment. So in the pelvis, we're talking about the femur thigh bones that come into the socket, the acetabulum of the pelvis bone. And when that head of the femur bone comes in, some of us have deeper sockets and some of us have more shallow sockets. And the more shallow socket people tend to be a little bit more flexible and also tend to potentially have a little bit more hypotension, meaning they're looser in their ligaments. And this is not necessarily a benefit, because we don't want our ligaments to be what is flexible. We need some flexibility in the ligaments, okay? But we don't want to stretch ligaments and we don't want to stretch tendons. They need to have the right amount of tensegrity to hold the bones of the body in their relationships to each other, moving properly. So too tight, no bueno. Too loose, no bueno. For those of us who have the deeper sockets and it have potentially less range of motion in the hip ball and socket joint, we may feel like we are tighter, and indeed also maybe have tighter musculature. This is very common in Western culture because we do a lot of chair sitting. We don't sit on the floor very much. We're not prone to squatting, necessarily to pick things up, but also just to squat for the sake of it. This is not in our culture normally, so the hips tend to get locked up. And then often, if you watch people walk, they're walking with a very linear gait and not with a lot of pelvic movement, rocking the pelvis over those femur bones with some healthy rotation and movement. And so this causes a lot of extra undue tension, not to mention the myth of tucking the tailbone. Please don't tuck your tailbone. Don't do it. A little bit of stability sometimes is necessary. Yes, sometimes I gather my sit bones a bit together so that I can root down through the feet in life and in yoga. But for the most part, tucking the tailbone brings mild flexion to the lumbar, shortens the anterior part of the body, and causes undue, unnecessary tension in certain pelvic muscles, as well as altering the optimization of the organ space in the body. And believe it or not, the curves of your spine matter to how your organ function is working. So we're gonna just work on a couple poses today that are gonna help us get the hips open a little bit in a general way. And I am not suggesting that this is going to be the cure-all for everybody, but this might help people who have general hip tightness. And if your ankles and knees are generally okay, this practice should be okay for you. If you have major knee issues, this practice may not be the one for you. I'm going to just ask right now ahead of time that you please remember to give this video a little like. And if you end up finding it beneficial, would you please share it to someone else who you know would benefit from it? Would you kindly consider subscribing to my channel? Because I love, love, love to teach, and I would love to connect with you more frequently, and I would love to connect with other people who you think might benefit from this more frequently. So that act of generosity means so much to me. Thank you. Let's move into our practice. So today we're going to need a couple blocks or something like blocks. Some sturdy books would do something like that. We're going to need a few blankets. I have 3 firm blankets here, and we're going to need a strap or, a bathrobe strap or a dog leash or whatever you've got handy will work. And so to start out with, we're going to start with just resting on our back with a little support under the head. You can use one blanket under the head. And we're just going to move the knees side to side a little bit, letting the pelvis move along with the knees. So I'm rocking on the feet, letting the feet rock, letting the knees rock, letting the hips rock. And you can start to come into your breath. And then from here you can pull the knees over your chest, maybe hug the shins if that works for your body. Rock a little bit more, and feel free to move the legs in their sockets a little bit, and just, what I want you to do? I want you to do what feels right to your body right now. So don't worry necessarily about whatever I'm doing. I want you to breathe and feel what your body is asking for. And then we're going to take the feet back down to the floor. And if you have another one of those blankets handy, you can take that blanket over to your left and make it rather thick. We're going to extend the left leg, scoot the hips over to the right, and come into a spinal twist with the right leg to the left. And if that one blanket isn't high enough for you to rest your knee and shin on, then please grab a second one or use a block or something else. And then did you notice how I picked up my left upper back and shoulder and moved it out to the left? Do that so that you get a lot of spread across your upper back. You can place your right hand on your waist if that helps. And we're just going to breathe into this spiral, allowing the outer right hip and the right side of our backs to open up here. So please take a couple deep breaths and notice if your body releases through the exhales. Allow the rotation through the exhalations. About 3 to 5 full long breath cycles. And then after you're done on this side, you can come back, square off the hips, take your prop over to the other side on the right, extend the right leg. You're going to pick your hips up, swish them to the left side of your mat, and let the left knee roll open to the right, supporting it on the blanket. And then you're going to pick up the right upper back, shoulder, move it out to the right a little bit so that you get that spread across the upper back. And then if that left shoulder is popping up off the floor too much and causing some strain in the shoulder, better to place the hand on the waist. And so wherever your left hand is, no problem. You're just going to allow this left side of your body to open up with your breath. Allow the spine to receive the rotation. And ideally, you have your right hip moved over to the left side of your mat enough that your tailbone and the posterior pelvis are more or less perpendicular to the floor. This is protecting your sacroiliac joint. So after you've had your 3 to 5 deep breaths, you're going to come back and we're going to grab that strap and we're going to take the right leg into the strap. But first, move this support over to the left side again. And we'll use the strap this way. So you're just going to place the strap in the the arch of the foot. Wrap the strap around your hands a bit. Let the elbows come down. And the idea here is that you have the left leg, the one that's on the floor, in full extension, reaching out through the heel, toes pointed to the ceiling. And your right leg is at an angle that you can feel a little bit of stretch in the back of the right thigh and the hamstrings, but maintain your lumbar curve in the low back so that you'll feel the lumbar has a little bit of a lift. So everybody's going to have a different angle. I don't want you to do what I'm doing. I want you to do what your body needs you to do. You're going to find the angle of your right leg. You're going to press up a little bit through the ball of the right foot, lengthening the front of the right ankle. And if you're on the very flexible side, you could actually have the toe, as long as you don't have to compromise those other components of the pose. So each person has their own variation from day to day. You've probably already been here for a few breaths, but we'll take 1 or 2 more. Then you're going to take the strap fully into your left hand. You're going to swoosh the hips over to the right side of the mat and cross the right leg over to the left. Trying to maintain the extension in both knees. And then picking up that left upper back and shoulders so you get that great spread across the upper back. So nice to feel that, so that your body becomes a vessel in which the spine can rotate. Now the stretch is going to be a little more pronounced on the outer right hip and into the flank on the right side of your back. And again, use as much strap, could be a lot, or maybe it's not very much, it depends on your body, to enable you to have full extension in both knees. About 3 to 5 breaths, you're already part of the way there. You can always pause the video and stay longer. You can always come out before I say so. This is not Simon Says, it is yoga, so listening to your body is most important. So when you're complete on this side, come on out. And we're going to switch, bringing this prop over to the right. And right leg up. And here we are, finding the appropriate angle of your right leg while you have plenty of energy. I'm sorry, did I say right leg? Yoga teacher disease, I swear. Your left leg with plenty of vigor reaching out through your right heel. You're going to press up through the ball of the right foot and make sure that the stretch that you feel in the back of the left raised left leg is mild and sustainable, something you can breathe with, something you can keep going for a good handful of breaths here. As I know we think about the hamstrings as being leg muscles, and of course they are, but guess where they attach? They attach to the pelvis. So we want to make sure that we're, attending to them, because the hamstrings can hold the pelvis hostage, as my yoga teacher used to say. We're going to take the strap fully into the right hand. You're going to swoosh your hips over to the left and cross that left leg over to the right. Adjust your right upper back and shoulder. Make sure that your tailbone is about perpendicular to the floor, the posterior pelvis and tailbone. And keep the feet alive, especially the left foot in the strap. You're going to press out through the ball of the left foot beyond the strap. So you keep vigor in the leg as you breathe into this opening. Couple deep breaths. If it's too intense, please give yourself a little more strap. There is no point in suffering through this. Yes, a little intensity. Yes, a little challenge. Suffer. Why? Aren't there enough things you have to suffer in life? Why suffer through our yoga practice? And then release. Come back. Square off the hips. And just take a second. Extend the legs down. Take a second and feel the effect. It should feel pretty amazing. You should feel some warmth, some buzz or hum in the tissue. The feet might have some warmth in them. And then we're going to come on up. And now we're going to set up for our pigeon pose. So in the pigeon pose, first of all, if you're on a hard floor, what you can do here is just take a blanket and pad the floor. If you're on carpet, you're probably fine. But we just want to give a little padding for the knee and the hips here. And then secondly, we're going to have a second blanket off to the right side. We're going to use that maybe, depending on your body. And the blocks in front of us. Okay, so a lot of times in pigeon pose, this is very difficult because the external hip rotators are very, very, very tight. So even though ideally the shin would be going across the front of the mat, a lot of people's bodies can't accomplish that. Guess what? Mine hasn't yet. I've been practicing this pose since, I don't know, 1998. Still not happening. So you're going to angle your front shin, whatever amount you need to angle it, so that you can have levelness in your pelvis. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to extend the left leg back, bring the right knee behind the right wrist, right foot more or less behind the left wrist, and then you're going to slide your left knee as far back as you can. And notice, okay, do you have some space between your right hip and the floor? Yeah? Okay. So then shove that blanket into that little space. And what I'm going to encourage you to do, we don't need the bricks quite yet. I'm going to encourage you to rock the hips a little bit side to side, staying on the hands. Try not to slump down to the floor, crush down. Try to keep a little bit of lift through your chest. Try to keep the collarbones wide, rock the hips a little, and find where you feel like your hips are about level. Imagine if you're using one of those levels you'd use to hang a shelf. Where would the bubble be in your pelvis if you could level them out? And then that's when we're going to pause. And then you're going to have your hands on the floor and you're going to pull your hands back a little so the shoulder blades come together. When you do that, can you feel the front of your body stretch? Okay? And so we're going to take that and draw it down. But I want you to think about drawing it forward instead of down. So maybe you stay up a little bit. Maybe this is where your pose is. Maybe you come down and you're on your shins. If you're very flexible, maybe you're coming farther down. But I'd like to encourage you to keep length in the front of your body, not hump or round the spine like a camel to get closer to the floor. Who cares how close you get? And then find out how high up is your head and rest it on a block or your hands. So maybe the block is at this level. You know, you're going to find what's working for your body. Then I want you to bring your attention, please, to your back foot and make sure that the heel is pointed towards the ceiling and you're not letting the left heel flop open. And then you're going to bring your awareness into your pelvis. And what you're going to do here is you're going to turn your pelvis inside of your body clockwise. So it doesn't really go very far, but you're going to invite the right hip to move back and the left hip to move forward. I think of kind of like I'm tightening a water spigot. So breathe with this. Release tension in the neck, jaw, and eyes. They don't need to be tense. Try to exhale, soften the outer right hip. Allow the outer right thigh to melt down towards the floor as you invite this very subtle rotation in your pelvis. If you want to amplify this a little bit more, press the right big toenail into the floor as you do that subtle rotation. And after about a minute or two, up to your body, you can stay longer if you want. You're going to use your hands and come up, lifting the chest first. And this is where we're going to start to bring the blocks in. You can walk the blocks back alongside your body, and you're going to draw the shoulder blades together, lifting the back of the head. So the chin doesn't necessarily lift up here, but the chest, the sternum does. And I'm going to make sure that I'm honoring that level, that idea of that level in my chest. If you don't have two blocks, sometimes I use my thigh and one block. That works just fine. And this also depends on the length of your arms and how flexible you are. So now we're accessing the stretch in the anterior pelvis. Good. So you're going to use your hands against whatever you're touching to pull. Lift up through the back top of the head. Press the top of your right foot into the mat with that little rotation. Press the top of your left foot into the mat to help you minimize the pinch in your low back. There should be no pinch in the low back. Too intense? Lean forward. Got more? Come up and back. Now we're going to come out. Hands to the mat. Slide that left leg forward. Scoot the blanket over. And bring your left knee behind your left wrist, left foot behind your right wrist. Slide the right leg as far back as it'll go. And then bring that blanket to be underneath your left hip as much as it needs to be. And we're going to rock the hips a little bit side to side. Just kind of work the hip joints, coming into presence with the pelvis. And then you're going to find what feels like level to you. And when you find what feels like level, you're going to start to pull on the mat. So you draw the shoulder blades together, front of the body lengthens, and we're going to descend by drawing forward. You've got one of those blocks handy. You can place the block under your head. If the block isn't high enough, prop it up on your hands. You know, I would like you to please bring the floor to you. Don't bring yourself to the floor. I want you to please make the pose customized to your body. Do not contort your body to make a pose that you think it should do. You're going to build the pose around you. So remember, the back right heel is pointed towards the ceiling. And you're going to bring that awareness to your left hip and draw it back, and your right hip and draw it forward. So in this case, it would be a counterclockwise turn. If you're turning the spigot, this is lefty-loosey, you're turning the water on. Nice deep breath, let the jaw, eyes, release. Deep breath. Exhale, release the outer left hip, and the outside line of the left thigh down towards the floor. Let the belly soften, let the body naturally deepen in the pose without force. Do your best to maintain some length through the anterior body, through the torso, reaching out through the chest. Try to avoid the temptation to hump the spine to get closer to the floor. And exhale, coming on up. We're going to use these bricks and come up to something closer to vertical. So remember to press the back foot into the floor and pull on the brick so the top of the head lifts up, the sternum, your chest bone lifts up, shoulder blades come together, and we're opening up the anterior right hip here. Yeah, there's all sorts of fancy things that yogis can do here. I'm about functionality. Sometimes fancy things creep in, but I'm really much more interested in having a functional body that I am mindfully using, mindfully working with. To me, that is where I land in yoga and where I land in my teaching. So I'm not trying to give you a whole lot of flash and flare here. I'm trying to give you tools that you can use. And then we're going to release. And you're going to bring these props out of the way, slide your left knee back, and we're going to come into a child's pose. So you may have your knees as close together as you want, or as far apart as you require. And then folding the body over, maybe you land the forehead on your stacked hands, or maybe you stack your fists, or maybe you place the forehead on a block, whatever seems to work best for your body. And we're just going to release the back with your breath. So you're going to breathe into the roundness of your own back. Expanding the shoulder blades, the spinal column and the rib cage with your big, generous inhales. And letting the weight of the body drop to the floor through your exhales. Next exhale, you can push yourself up. And the very last thing that we're going to do is we're just going to sit for about 30 seconds to a minute. So here's how I'm going to suggest that you make a little seat for yourself. I'm going to turn this blanket sideways so that I have some padding underneath me. And then I'm going to take my block, and I don't mind using a block, but you can also use a stack of blankets. You know, there's all sorts of ways you could use a couple firmer pillows. And I'm going to place the block down, and then I'm going to pad the block, and I'm actually going to wrap my blanket around the bottom of it, so that what ends up happening is that my block becomes a little bit of a slope. So if you see the side, in fact, I'll do this to the side so that you can see how this ends up being. If you see it from the side, I'm making a little bit of a slope. And when we are sitting on a little bit of a slope tends to help our pelvis be at an angle that gives our spine its natural and intentional healthy curves. So when I sit on this into cross-legged position, because I lifted the back of the block up a little bit, it created that slope, and I have an anterior flexion, anterior rotation in my pelvis here. So what that means is that my sit bones are moving back. I'm sitting on the front edge of my sit bones are moving back. I've got a good curve in my lumbar, and it enables me to float my spine up and have the head feel rather neutral. And if I'm going to spend any time here, actually what I'll do is support this knee so I don't have any joints hanging in space. I have my right shin forward, so the right knee is the one I supported. So from here, once you find your good seat, maybe pause the video and then find your good seat and then unpause the video and finish up with me here sitting. Okay, so we're all together in a good seat. How about you close your eyes, let the jaw soften, take a deep breath in, exhale, feel the shoulder blades drop down the back next to each other, feel the collarbones widen, let the back top of your head float up a bit. Deep breath, exhale, soften the groin creases. Feel length from the groin crease to the inner knee. Allow your weight down through your hips and allow a lightness to travel up through the spine. One more deep breath. Slow exhale. And then if you want to join me with your hands at Namaste prayer pose, you may bring the hands together at your sternum, at your heart center, and let's bow. Thank you so much. Namaste. I love to share these videos with you. I hope that you get something out of them. Many blessings.